Big questions, really.
Yeah, but what I'd like to do is to sort of, if you could answer in statements as
Yeah.
well. I mean, I'm
Rather
trying to
yes
frame
and
the
no.
questions. Yeah, that's it, the old yes-no quiz. No, yes, no,
Yeah.
no. So, can I just start by getting you to tell me your name and, you know, what
I
you
was.
used to do and what you was
Yeah.
and what you're doing now, as it were.
Yeah, John Beclake, my name. I used to be head of space technology at the Science Museum from 72 to about 94.
Okay, and now?
And now I more or less play a bit of golf, watch rugby. I'm helping out at the old Greenwich Observatory, restoring the old telescopes down in Herstmonceux.
Excellent. Okay, right. Let's just talk about how Britain came to recruit Germans and how that all came about, and you know, at the end of World War II, how Britain targeted Germans.
Yeah. Well, basically, during the Second World War, we'd realised that a lot of German technology was very good. I mean, a lot of it wasn't so good. And come 1944, when the V2s began to fall and the V1s began to fall, we began to set up teams, CHIOS, BIOS, Combined Intelligence Operatives, Fiat, Field Intelligence teams, would scour the continent looking for people. Come early 45, I think it was, we made an agreement with the Americans that we'd share the spoils. Then France got in on the act, and obviously Russia were playing their own field. We sent teams behind the lines, certainly at Kiel, as you've heard from Seamus. We also went behind the lines to get the early comets, the 163s. The problem we had was we'd spent all our money. I mean, Britain was bankrupt in 41, so what we were in 45, I don't know. We had no money. Our plans were purely, if you like, defensive rocketry, but we knew we wanted them. So we set out in order to get what we could on the cheap, I suppose. Our biggest problem also was the fact that we were running out of engineers and scientists because the Attlee government in 45 decided we were going to have an atom bomb as well. So there's a shortage of trained engineers, technical scientists, almost anything. So we got anything we could get. One or two of them came through the back door, but mainly they came from 4 places, as I said. A girl, and I forget her name now, decided we ought to do something called Operation Backfire, where we would collect enough material for V2s, 8 of them in fact, fire them, and from there we'd get some Germans. We also took over the old Sanger research station on Lüneburg Heath, where we employed people from the local area. Kiel, we took a lot of scientists from for the submarine work, but also a lot of them who were working on the 163 engine, the hydrogen peroxide work. There's a fourth one I forget. Oh yes, we also took over the Rheinmetall Borzig plant and combined with Moser, the small arms group. About 140 scientists were there writing up their experiences. So if you like, we've got a collection of what we call them, it's Hosted Exploitation Centre, thousands of reports written by the Germans. Then we came to actually hiring them. It's no doubt we were very lax. We fired 3 V2s, we built 8. We had, I think, about 100, 120 Germans working on that team. We had another 50 at Truro working. But come middle of 46, when the work on the continent had to stop because of Allied agreements, we hadn't set contracts up. I mean, we didn't know whether we were going to hire them, who we were going to hire. We lost a lot of people that way, but in the end, the civil service issued about 70 or 80 6-month contracts. They're called alien, I can't think what the word is, something aliens, enemy aliens, as they came across. From the rocket side, we got 39 people, I think. As I said, it's a confusion with whether Barsk is Barker and Barsk, or whether they're 2 different people. We didn't get the good ones. There were, if you like, 4 excellent people we got, 5 or 6 average ones, and the rest were probably unfairly called experimental engineers. They were technicians. One of the interesting ones, a gentleman called Coulterman, though. He was probably one of the best welders the German had. And he came to Westcott to learn to weld aluminium. couldn't weld aluminium. And Germany had tried to make an aluminium exhaust nozzle for a V2. In fact, it's on display at Peenemünde now. So he came across, and it's funny, the people who were the top dogs, Walter Riedel, whose book's just been published, Ziebland, de Mont, who probably were, and Schmidt, who probably were the cream of our Germans, went on to do very little. And Walter Riedel lived in England, his children still live here, a nice fellow, but he never did much. De Mont disappeared mysteriously in England under the, under the protection of the Home Office. Ziebland carried on to do a lot, but we didn't get all that many. The reason was, one, the Americans took the best. The Germans didn't really want to come to England, we couldn't afford them. The French were offering better terms. We wouldn't even allow the wives to come for 6 months. And don't forget, people were starving in Germany at the time, whereas the French, they all came together. They're also divided into 3 different places. Don't get me wrong, good technicians, a lot of them. Good, solid scientific officers, senior engineers and things like that. The problem I think we had with the engineering side of it, and the space engineering side of it particularly, was we brought no charismatic person with us. I mean, von Braun, for all his faults, and there weren't many, he was very charismatic, a brilliant engineer. Everyone who spoke to him liked him. Even people who I know now who knew he was a Nazi still liked the chap. In the aeronautics field, see, the Brits had some good ones. They had Kuckerman, Dieter Kuckerman. He was very, very good publicist, very well-mannered, became more Briton than the British, used to sing in the choir. And he was able to push the aeronautics side. We also had people like Boostman, who was the big engineer at Göttingen. All our engineers in the space side were middle order or below. None of them was able to push the space and technology field. We couldn't have afforded it anyhow.
Excellent. Can you talk in a bit more detail about the recruitment process? How did we target people? Did they volunteer to come over? Were they co-opted to come over? How did that work?
It started off in 1945. There was a list of all the main German engineers, and the Brits and the Americans sat down with called List 1, List 2, British desires, American desires. Then the French, on the back of de Gaulle, got in, so the British desires, American desires, the French get the rest. So there were lists drawn up, and you find there's an overlap, and all these lists are in the Public Record Office. There's an overlap between the two. But what happened was the von Braun team deliberately went to the Austrian Alps to be captured by the Americans. So even if we wanted them, we wouldn't have got them. We didn't ask for von Braun. We asked for 5 or 6 on the American list. We got very few. So if you like, it's a gentleman's agreement. It's a bit like cricket, really, a gentleman's agreement which is spoiled by a fast bowler. And the fast bowler is stronger, America was stronger. They also agreed on the technology that we would have 30 V2s. And we found them steaming out of Antwerp harbour aboard Liberty ships. And there are articles, or there are minutes in the Public Record Office wondering whether we should intercept them with cruisers and destroyers. So there was a lot of going on. I mean, America called it Operation Paperclip. And the reason was they took the paperclip off. If they thought there was something suspect, they just went straight through. So there was a lot of low-level dealing. The French came into Operation Backfire and actively poached some people. But the French had also done the same with the supersonic wind tunnel at Kuku under the American eyes. So if you like, it was a free-for-all. It's a very unsavoury story. Nordhausen, where the V2s were being made, was in the Russian zone. It was agreed where that split. And the Americans went in and wiped everything of use out of it. The Allies ceased to be Allies. On the how do we hire, the civil service, we were allowed to hire people who would be useful to British advancement of science and technology, providing, one, they weren't rabid Nazis, and provided two, there is no one in Britain who could do the same. But as I said, this fell foul of the fact that all our scientists and engineers were totally fully stretched on one, replacing British industry, and two, with the nuclear bomb program, which was starting in 46. And you must remember that if we're talking about military scientists, there is equal number came in who were civil engineers. I know people like Grub Parsons took half a dozen civilian engineers to work in their plant. So I'm just talking now about the civil service. Hired on 6 months contracts, in general kept in barracks or houses together. After 6 months, they're probably extended, which would take them from middle of 46 when they started coming to middle of 47. The wives and family had been allowed to come across that in general. The dross in the rocket field, only one, had been sent away. Then the big crunch came when they had to be made permanent or pay for them. Up until that time, the Central Civil Service, I think, were paying for the services of the German engineers rather than Westcott, Waltham Abbey or Farnborough. But then the decision came that we'd have to pay for them or get rid of them. In general, they're nearly all offered contracts, except the people at Barrow, which weren't rocket engineers anyhow, but the hydrogen peroxide. They were all let go. And there was only one kept at Waltham Abbey, and that was Hans Siebland. And he became more British than the British. Within 6 months of being here, he became a member of the IMechE, and he began to write papers, understood English perfectly. So if you like, we made him English. Farnborough, 50-50 left or went. If they went across the pond to America, and one or two to the colonies, to Australia and Canada. But nearly everyone at Westcott stayed. I don't know the difference. They were certainly treated differently. At Barrow, they were treated with disdain, disgust and hate to begin with for the first 6 or 7 months. I've trawled the Barrow papers, I've trawled the Westcott papers, Aylesbury papers, trawled the Farnborough papers. There are very few expressions of, we're not having them here. I think maybe Barrow's a smaller town. I mean, Farnborough had been used to the REE, and Westcott was something new. But having said that, if anyone should have kicked up, I mean, there's no more conservative place than the RE Farnborough. They've got the high-bound traditions, or maybe the Germans fitted well in with high-bound traditions, I don't know.
But you've sort of answered another one that I was going to ask.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. What the reaction of the British public was to these Germans being in their midst?
To begin with, at Barrow, I read out an article this morning from the Barrow Women's Town Guild who kicked up. There are 5 or 6 like this. The women's interested in this, women's people doing it. They didn't want them there, no way. At Farnborough, they didn't come with a big ship pulling a submarine. They came with 1s and 2s. For example, Kuckerman and his sidekick, Joanna Weber, they came a year's difference. They were able to fit in far easier, far bigger establishment. No problem at Westcott. They were kept in barracks for a while, so the public didn't see them for 6 months. But I think what changed it was when wives came across and children. The socialist government weren't madly happy. The trade unions were definitely unhappy because although, as I said, war is meant to be to make a land fit for heroes to live in, I mean, we had nothing. We had slum houses and no jobs. So the idea of German engineers, especially the not particularly brilliant ones, coming in and taking British jobs were anathema to the socialist government.
Can you talk in a bit more detail about the projects that they got involved with?
Well, let's do the Barrow people. The Barrow people came specifically to try and employ hydrogen peroxide to submarine technology. And the spin-off in the rocket field was used with hydrogen peroxide. They wanted a sprint technology. In fact, I think HMS Explorer, as Seamus was saying, I think it held the world record for fastest underwater sprint. Waltham Abbey, they took people who were looking at heat transfer and liquid fuels. So people like Siebland, Dumont, who was a catalyst man, Luft. they were all working in liquid fuels. So they carried on for the Trewin work, came to Waltham Abbey to look at different oxidizers, different fuels, heat transfer, pumps and things. The ones at Farnborough mainly came to do missile systems. It's very interesting that one or two of the Farnborough people came from Peterborough, but they weren't propulsion engineers. They were aeronautical engineers, they were communication systems and control engineers. Schumacher came from Telefunken. So they went to do, if you like, missile systems. And we're talking here small missiles. There was a misconceived idea we'd have a stretch V2 called Menace in 45 and 46, but that fell through. So all we were talking about was basically air-to-air and surface-to-air short-range missiles. So at Farnborough, they were worked on missile systems, radio telemetry, control, aerodynamics. At Westcott, they went to do propulsion elements, and nearly all of them were liquid. I mean, I don't think the Germans could teach us much on solid fuel. It was nearly all liquid. So they went, people like Barsk was working on pumps, and he did a pump for the Beta engine. People like Kretschmer were working with Waltham Abbey on exhaust temperatures, exhaust shapes, and combustion chambers. They did quite a bit of work also at Westcott on different materials, different fuels, nitrogen tetroxide, nitric acid, kerosene, things like that. So if you like, propulsion at Westcott, but also, don't forget, we were working in our firms, Armstrong Siddeley, and what became Rolls-Royce, were also working on rocketry with very little cross-feed. And the first liquid fuel rocket we flew in Britain was made at Farnborough for the transonic model aircraft, which flew in 1948 and broke the sound barrier over the Isles of Scilly. That was a German design, almost totally. You could take that engine apart and put the valves from a Volta 109, 509, same valve. And for all the people I've talked to, they didn't use any of the Germans at Westcott at all, or at Farnborough, but they did use the technical reports produced. So that was a German technology produced by the Brits.
Right. I suppose there are two questions here. Britain launched V2s. They launched some V2s in France, was it?
No, they launched it from Cuxhaven on the
oh, that's right.
On the North Sea coast.
Yeah. First of all, the Germans were involved in those launches.
Oh, good grief, yes.
Yeah. And the other one was you've already sort of mentioned, that some of them went abroad and some of them, but others stayed and they made lives here. And,
and the family are still here. The kids are still here.
If I could just get you to talk a bit about that as well.
I don't know so much about that. All I do know is people like Paparido, whose book I just bought. His grandchildren are still living near Westcott. Carl Schirmacher, who went to Farnborough, his sons are still living. I think one of them is a medical doctor, still living in the Farnborough area. And people like Joanna Weber, who came across 1946 from Göttingen, not to work in the space field, but to work in the aeronautics. She still lives near Farnham, so she's still around and still hale and hearty.
Excellent. Yeah. What was their contribution? I mean, how significant was the technical knowledge they brought? Would we have managed without it?
I think it gave us 18 months. The gentleman was talking about the Zeppelins. The Germans had done it very well. They knew how to do it. We couldn't afford to keep them as a team to go the American way. Their technology on hydrogen peroxide was invaluable. I mean, we wouldn't have thought of it. We'd have probably gone down the liquid oxygen alcohol route. So on that level, experience, practical experience, and having done it, they were invaluable. But after about 4 or 5 years, that experience was beginning to wane. Other people were still coming up. Individually, as I said, maybe 4 of the Germans you could put in top class. Ziebland, Schmidt, who died in an explosion at Westcott, Zeppelin Schmidt, Dumont, who I don't know why disappeared off the face of the earth, but he did. And, Paparido from Westcott, who, for some reason, Von Braun said he was the best engineer ever had. Von Braun spoke very highly of him, and his things on record, I hope he's putting his talents to good use of the British rocket programme. Nothing much came out of it. I think maybe the civil service system stopped it, the lack of money certainly stopped it. They weren't allowed free range like they would be in Germany. You heard the story that you could do what you like more or less as long as there's something exotic at the end. We were slightly more focused. So if you like, the contribution, all I can say really is a nice contribution to social life and to general life in learning about the Germans. A lot of experience and practical work, particularly on hydrogen peroxide. But in general, it wouldn't have mattered if they weren't there.
Right. Actually, I know. I'll just stop for a second. Can I just get you to talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, one of the best chaps we got was Schmidt. He came from the Messerschmitt 163 engine plant in Kiel. In fact, he was one of the head designers for the rocket-powered motor. He came across work at Westcott. In fact, he was head of the group. I think they had about 16 people here. And he was acknowledged head. About 8 of those people came from Westcott, all underneath him. And unfortunately, he was testing a Ratel one day in one of the test sites there. And I've seen some pictures of it today. And it blew up, and he was killed. So if you like, one of the best Germans we got didn't last very long. I think it was 48. So he'd only been there about 18 months.